Dominic Baldwin, welcome to Focus on the Fun Stuff.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'm very excited for you to be here. So for anybody that doesn't know who you are Dominic, you're the founder and CEO of Zentum. And Zentum is a financial planning, but also a financial wellness consultancy. And honestly, it's that latter bit, that financial wellness, which is one of the main reasons why I knew as soon as we met, when we were introduced, that I needed you to come onto the podcast, because we were just laughing just before this podcast that I think a lot of people have very specific thoughts about people that give financial advice, and it's quite old school, it's quite boozy, it's quite not necessarily that they always give advice that's at the benefit of the person they're giving the advice to. And the way you approach it has pretty much blown me away. Like, I've never heard you talk about it in such a holistic way and in a very different entrepreneurial way as well, I think is one of the key bits for people listening to this today. So we're going to talk about Zentum. We're going to talk about how you approach financial wellness. And there's going to be a lot of practical stuff, I think, to take away from it as well. But it'd be really great. I always start my podcast, Dominic, like, you've not always been in financial services. You were part of a farming family originally, weren't you?
Yeah, originally from the Lake District. So I had a most amazing childhood. Brought up on a dairy farm in the Lake District, went to boarding school in the Yorkshire Dales, went there when I was 7, stayed there until I was 17. Shed a tear when I left school.
Oh, really?
I loved it so much.
No, it's the other way around.
I know it does. People do find that a little bit strange, but I loved the community. I loved the discipline. I loved the structure. I loved the outdoors. It was just the most idyllic childhood. 2 parents who were fantastic, unconditional love from both my parents. It was amazing. Left school. I then ideally wanted to join the army, so I went to see if I could join the army and did a potential officers course. Ultimately, I failed that, which later transpired was as a result of dyslexia, which hadn't been diagnosed. But going back to the 80s, you were perceived just maybe not to be too bright, whereas now it's actually slightly different. I then moved to London and was involved in sport in London. I then went into property management with a firm in London who ultimately then shipped me over to Hong Kong. So I lived in Hong Kong for a while, which predominantly just involved playing rugby.
Okay.
But that was amazing.
Also great, yeah.
And then whilst I was in Hong Kong, I got a shoulder injury playing in a couple of matches. I think we were playing against, at the time, New Zealand forces, and we also played against Fiji. And they're big guys. And so, unfortunately, one of my shoulders didn't stand up to that. So I came back to the UK and had the shoulder repaired. And the surgeon at the time turned around and said, the best thing for you to do is to go and work on a building site and rebuild your shoulder and rebuild your strength up. Okay. Because of that operation. I was still only 24, 25 years old. So I went and worked for a local builder up in the Lake District, a fantastic gentleman who was really creative, really lovely, generous person who I worked with for a year or so. And during that time period, I learned how to build a house from start to bottom, which later on came in quite useful to actually know how to do that. And then during that whole process, somebody approached me and kind of said, you've got good interpersonal skills, you've got high levels of energy, you're determined and everything else. You would be great to go into financial services. And why don't you go into financial services? And so I think that was in 1993.
Okay. And did you know much about it at the time? Or?
Not really. I think if I'm being really honest, I probably was drawn to financial services to start with because of the lure of being paid a lot of money.
Yeah.
So, and so I knew other people that were doing it. I knew that I was highly motivated and driven, and ultimately I felt, right, well, this was a way for me to earn some money. Mm-hmm. And so we were chuckling just before I came on this, is that the reason I know the date that I started my training is because on the Sunday I ran the London Marathon and on the Monday I started my training with Allied Dunbar. And my feet were so sore, I did the whole training in slippers because I actually couldn't put my shoes on.
How did they take to that?
They thought it was brilliant. I mean, they smiled, and they had the nickname the Marathon Man. And
okay, that's quite cool.
And I was motivated. They probably just knew in my character that I was motivated to succeed. Mm-hmm. So I did the training. I stayed with them there for a year, but ultimately their culture and their processes and everything else didn't sit with me. So I then moved to another organisation for another 7 years, where I was a director and a shareholder. And then, because of a number of circumstances, which we'll probably come on to, I left that business, and in 2004 we created Zentum. And the whole purpose, if I try and just encapsulate what our purpose is, it is to guide our clients or families to live a life of inspiration and a life of authenticity, and to make sure that, or to help you consistently make decisions, which for us is financial decisions, that align with that vision of inspiration and authenticity. So that is all encompassing. Yeah. But then there's a lot more complexity that comes with it when we get into the detail.
Yeah, totally. We spoke a few times now about this, because everything you said there about like from the planning perspective of living a life of authenticity, but also Zentum is walking the walk in terms of like you charge fixed fees, don't you? And we will get into that a little bit later on about why and how you've done that. And I know there'll be other maybe practices out there that say they charge fixed fees, but actually the model that you are putting together, is there anyone else that does it in?
I think that I wouldn't get too fixated on how we charge at this stage, because I think it's really important to understand what our role is and how we can make a difference to people's lives. And so and part of the inspiration I kind of got to do this business was that before I had children and was married and everything else, I used to go over to Zermatt in the summer, so in Switzerland, with a great friend of mine, and we used to go climbing for a week or two. And part of the process of that is that you would travel into Zermatt, you'd go to the guide's hut, and you would say, I'm here for a week, and I want to climb X, Y, and Z. What are the conditions like? And do you have a guide that could come with us? So they would then ask us to go to one of the local coffee shops, and they would ring a guide, and a guide would come and meet us at the coffee shop. And if you've done this a number of times, the conversation is so much more complex than you initially think. Because what the guide is wanting to identify is on a number of things. He wants to understand what an amazing day means to you and why it's so amazing to you. What do you want to do? Do you want to do ridges? How long do you want it to be? What do you want to see, and everything else? So he wants to understand, how can I give you the most amazing day? But he's also ascertaining, what are your values, and can I trust you and your values, and am I prepared to put my life in your hands as I am putting my life in his hands? So very quickly you have to get to the crux of, what does an amazing day look like, and if we're going to go on an adventure together, do I trust you on that journey? And at no point during that whole conversation would a guide ever ask me how much I had in my bank account to determine how much he was going to charge me. His fee would be a reflection of the time and the complexity and the resources that he needed to make sure that he gave me the most amazing experience, or me and my friend the most amazing experience. But he also took into consideration that he wanted to make sure we were safe, because he has a responsibility of care to make sure we're safe. But he also wants to make sure that if we need to look right or left because there's something amazing that we need to look out for, or if there's danger somewhere, that he is aware to point that out. And then also an amazing guide is somebody in some ways who is not front of everything. You know, a brilliant guide is ideally invisible. You're there with your great friend, you're there with your family, you're wanting an amazing day, but you just want to know that the guide is somewhere lurking around to make sure that you're seeing the best of everything and they're protecting you from danger. So that in some ways kind of made me think, well, surely can we not create a business like that?
Yeah, a great analogy for it.
And if I maybe share with you an example of what I feel is good, and then I can share with you an example of maybe something that is not as good. Is that okay?
Absolutely, sounds good.
So last year I went to a funeral of one of my clients. It wasn't a sad occasion. The gentleman had an amazing life, so it was a celebration of his life. And we went to the funeral, and his two sons spoke at the funeral, who are also clients of Zentum. And it was, a really lovely service. And then afterwards, we're all having our cup of tea and a sandwich and what have you. And one of the sons came up, and we just had a little bit of small talk about life and everything else. And before he went off, he just said to me, I just want to thank you and your team for giving mum and dad the confidence to live the life they have lived.
Oh, wow.
He said for 30 years, they have travelled the world, they've moved house, they've given money away to their children, they've given the money away to charity, they've done everything they have wanted to do. And they would have never done it if it hadn't have been for the confidence and the encouragement and the plan that you helped them to create to live the life they have lived.
Gosh.
So he never once asked me about the returns on an investment. We never once talked about tax planning. That to me was
the essence
of the whole business.
Totally get that.
How can we be amazing guides to help our clients live a life of authenticity and inspiration? Mm-hmm. So, when I drove back, I kind of thought, yeah, job's done. But how can we then have that same impact on more and more and more families? Or ultimately, how potentially by us working in the way we work, can we potentially change the whole profession, or how can we change the whole industry or profession so that they start to see that actually this way of working changes people's lives for the better, rather than maybe a more transactional way. Mm-hmm. And then if you want, I can kind of share with you, an opposite experience. Yeah. Does that help?
Absolutely, yeah.
So as you and I have already discussed, part of the catalyst for creating Zentum was a personal experience that my own family had, and specifically my father. And my father was, beautiful human being, super kind, very generous, turned up at every single rugby game that Ben and I ever played in. So unconditional love, unwavering love, so absolutely fantastic. And in his, I think it was mid-20s, as an only child, he's lost both of his parents and inherited a reasonable sum of money.
Okay.
And over a 20-year period, all of that wealth disappeared. And within a 20 or so year period, my father lost his home. He lost all of his assets and everything else. And ultimately, my brother and the family and everything else, we made sure that he had a home, and we made sure he was all fine and everything else. It's not a disaster story as such. It's not a these things happen, and actually you can learn a lot from it. Uh-huh. And at some point, my father shared with me all of the paperwork as to what had happened over those 20 years.
20 years also feels like a relatively short period of time for it
Yeah,
to kind of all just...
Well, if you think of a lot of your listeners, and they are, business owners, and they maybe are thinking, oh, well, as I am now, looking at, well, if I'm looking to retire, well, then I potentially could be retired for 25, 30 or plus years. So I'm thinking, okay, well, over a 20-year period to inherit quite a substantial amount, and for all of that to evaporate or disappear. And so when my father shared with me all of the paperwork and we went through it all, I realised that the people that he was inviting into the room to offer guidance were not coming from a place that ideally I would have liked them to have come from.
Right.
So, and we're going back quite a long time. So this is changing. So this isn't across the board.
Yeah.
But ultimately, at that time, a lot of people who were involved in finance were coming through the door with an intention of, what product can I recommend to Lister? And how much of his wealth can I get him to put into that product? And ultimately, their salary depended on those answers. The more money he put in, the more products he took, the bigger the bonus was for that person.
Yeah.
Now, if you come into an environment with that mindset, where you are remunerated because of the volume or the number of products, you're not really a guide.
No.
You're just a salesperson.
Yeah.
And if you are then communicating with somebody who is really trusting, who potentially is maybe financially vulnerable because he just maybe didn't understand the subject matter, which, to be fair, most of us don't.
No, totally.
Unless it's your area of expertise.
Yeah.
You are incredibly vulnerable to making a decision and then not knowing the consequences of that decision, and then making another decision and another decision and another decision. And over that time period, there was consistently poor decisions were made. And for me, there was an element of sadness of thinking, wow, if only somebody else had come into that room when he was 26 or 27. And instead of saying to my father, hi, Lister, I've got a fantastic investment for you here, would be to have sat with my father and said, okay, Lister, so talk to me about your dreams and aspirations. Talk to me about your fears. Tell me, let's just have this conversation. Let's just sit together now for a bit of time and let's just see what flows. And if somebody had had the ability and skill set to do that and the intention, and if they were part of an organisation that had the culture and the values to do all of that, I feel that the outcome might have been different. And the consequences of my father's experience was an element of, he didn't have anybody guiding him. He then made poor decisions, and then from making poor decisions, he then made more poor decisions, and then ultimately he became poorly. He unfortunately got pancreatic cancer. We cared for him during that, and then he ultimately passed away very early, as he was 70 years old. And even though there's you could think there's lots of negatives in that conversation, there was also amazing insights to have had from that. The insights that I've had as a business owner now for 22 years and been in this profession for 33 years, the insights of knowing how to care for somebody properly, understanding the emotional journey that we all go on, has been incredibly valuable for me to be able to create a team that understands that and is then able to help our clients to navigate their lives better.
And that was ultimately the gap between kind of seeing his paperwork, that was like the trigger point to go in, I'm going to start Zentum. Yeah.
So I'd been involved in financial services for the first 9 years. The catalyst to start with was about, okay, how can I earn some good money and get paid well and everything else? So I probably was more transactional. It was about selling selling products and everything else. But then when I had the whole experience and the understanding and the consequences of that approach and seeing it for my father, that was the catalyst to say, do you know what? I think there is a different way we can be of service to people. And it's a harder way. It's a far more challenging conversation to have. It is, far more difficult to create a business that guides rather than sells.
Yeah.
However, it was always a case of how do we create a business that would serve the people I love the most? And if we can create a business, so every single decision of how we've tried to create the business would be if you now were sat in front of the person who I have unconditional love for and I am not here, will you take great care of them? And that's it.
Because fundamentally, can I just ask you about the business model part of it then? Because it is completely different, isn't it? The way that you operate to most and the way that you generate revenue.
Yeah.
And it is very different to most financial advisors. And I'm just interested in, just from a kind of business perspective or operational perspective, because that must have really taken some planning and thinking through of how on earth do we make this? Because I want to use the word, it's not, I assume your business is not as immediately lucrative as other financial planning practices because of the way you charge. So then that must have had a lot of real proper thinking about, well, how are we going to make this pay for itself, make a profit, be efficient, and all of those things. That must have been quite a...
In some ways, none of those were important.
Okay.
To start with.
Yeah.
As we are now entering into our 22nd year and we're looking to, make sure we're sustainable and the business can run if I wasn't here and everything else. But the whole driver, at least over the last 5 or 6 years, as we've decided to grow up as a consultancy rather than be a lifestyle business, was how do we serve in the best way we possibly can with no conflicts of interest, with absolute transparency, so that we can gain the trust of our clients and we can actually make a difference to their lives. And something that we have seen over the 22 years of working with successful families, materially successful families, is that there is very little, if any, correlation between your wealth and your well-being.
Okay.
That in a lot of cases for business owners, that they can be materially successful, they can be doing very, very well.
Oh, okay.
However, how they feel about their wealth or how they feel about life in general can actually be quite low.
Yeah.
So for me, it wasn't a case of right, how do we make you more money? How do we pay less tax? How do we do that? Yes, we know how to do that because we're a chartered firm. We have the academic understanding of the subject matter to know what to do, and we also have amazing connections with people who are the best at what they do. So we know who those people are, and we also know our subject very well. But that is not what changes how you feel about your experience of a human being. What changes your experience is your relationship with your wealth, understanding what your wealth is there to do. It's understanding what matters to you in life, and also understanding what your values are and why your values are important to you. And that is probably the area that most firms wouldn't really go deep into.
No, totally.
Whereas I'm fascinated by that area. And I also know that if you can create a safe environment where clients want to have that conversation, that changes their life. But it is not an easy conversation, and that you have to also be willing to show some vulnerability, because you've got to be honest with yourself. You've got to be willing to show some vulnerability. And if you do that, you're able to articulate what matters and why. And then you're able to make sure that all of your decisions that you make within your business or financially align with what matters to you and why.
Yeah, because I feel like most, I don't want to be too generalist because I'm sure there are other people that don't do this, but a lot of conversations with financial advisors will be what year do you like, what age do you want to retire?
Yeah.
How many holidays do you want to take? And how much money do you want to draw each year?
Yeah.
That feels to me like it pretty much covers off a lot of the review.
And there's no vulnerability there. There's no real vulnerability. If you're a business owner, as I am, and I asked you those questions, they're all academic questions. They're all just, if you're doing really well in your business, you can tell me how well you're doing. You can tell me how much money you've got. You can tell me how you're going to retire and everything else. There's no, that a lot of that for me is, is that what I'm wanting to do is understand what matters to you and your family. And, why did you fall in love with your partner? Talk to me about your dreams and aspirations for your children. Talk to me about your dreams and aspirations for what you want to do for your experience of a human being. And then that will actually, all of your answers to that will determine when you want to retire, how much you need to retire, and everything else.
Understand.
So we do a couple of exercises. So again, I want to try and kind of give some practical examples so your listeners can actually maybe do something here. So I was showing you just beforehand. So one of the exercises that I do every single year when I go away with Wendy, my wife, is just checking in what matters to me and why. Okay, so I just kind of call those priorities, and ideally just get a blank piece of paper, so an A4 piece of paper, draw the biggest circle you can on that piece of paper, and then divide it into 4, so just slice it into 4, down vertical and horizontal, and then divide those up into 8. So you have 8 little segments. And then ideally you want to be doing this exercise when you are in your happy place, whatever that might be. So for me, if I wasn't on holiday, it would be walking in the Lake District. So if I'm up in a mountain in the lakes, if I'm there with Wendy, or if I'm there just with the dog, or if I'm just on my own in the hills. So ideally, I want to have a quiet mind. I don't want to be thinking about everything that's going on. I want to be as quiet and as present as I possibly can be. And then in that time of having a quiet mind, to actually write down the 8 most important things in my life. And finances can only be one. So some of the others, I will give one away, but I don't want to give others away because I want people to come up with their own.
Okay,
but
so they're not fixed.
No.
It can be what's just most important.
It can be anything.
Yeah, okay.
What is important to you or to me or to Zoe or whoever it might be, they're unique to us for our own reason. And they're important to us at this time, and they may or may not change in the future. The one thing that we have which is important to all of our clients is family. If you do not value the importance of family, then we are probably not the organisation for you, because for us, family is really important. And if family is not important, there isn't the same level of complexity, because family brings complexity and dynamics and everything else. So the process is that you go around there and you would identify the 8 most important aspects of your life. And then once you've done that, you'd give yourself a score. And so if for, say, family at the moment, let's say everything was absolutely amazing, it's the best it's ever been, I could give myself a 9 or 10. But if there are areas where I'm not so happy with family. So I could, as a business owner, I could be working incredibly hard. I'm not seeing my family. I don't have a good relationship with my wife. I don't have a great relationship with my children, whatever it might be, which I've heard time and time again from business owners because they're so busy running their business.
Yes.
You might only give yourself a 3.
Yeah.
So you do that whole exercise, and then you just kind of go, okay, great, park it. And then if you wanted to, because if you want to kind of go quite deep on this conversation, you could then also identify what your core values are. And ideally, I would ask people, can you articulate and identify maybe your top 5 to start with core values? And some people find that, again, quite difficult to do, and ultimately we're trying to get you to give answers that are coming from your heart, your soul, your spirit. We're trying for you not to give us academic answers, and more often than not, we're able to ascertain whether they're academic or not. And a good way for you to work out what your core values are, if you're struggling, is think of somebody that you really admire, somebody that you've got unconditional love for, somebody who's had a real big impact on your life. So for me, it would be probably my mother, my father, it could be my stepfather, John T, something like that. And if I think about why I have unconditional love for those people, what qualities do they have? And why do those qualities resonate so much with me? Mm-hmm. And actually, that is a good way for me to get an understanding as to my core values.
Yeah.
And so once I know what matters to me in life, once I know what my core values are, well, then I can then move to the conversation that you were saying a lot of other advisors have is, okay, right, well, we have some money. We have to make a decision in business. We need to decide what we do. Well, our decision making, when we look at an option of a decision, financial decision, we look at the consequences of that decision, and then we look whether those consequences align with our priorities and align with our values. And as long as they align with our priorities and values, i.e. takes maybe the number from a 3 to a 4 or a 4 to a 5 or a 5 to a 6, then the likelihood is that that is a good decision to make. Mm-hmm. And then you have to be willing to be challenged by your guide, but the guide is challenging you because they're wanting to make sure that that decision really is the right decision. So they're challenging you to make really good decisions that are right for you and your family.
Yeah, I could imagine that exercise is actually quite difficult to do on your own if you haven't done it before.
Yeah.
I think it'll be quite a shock for a lot of people, or even just with values, or thinking of 8 things that are most important to you. Even with 8, you know, people go friends, family, maybe business. I feel like you get to 4 or 5, maybe past that, people starting to go, I'm actually not sure what else is important to me.
It is. So I, again, I've had meetings with business owners before where they've come to our home in Cheshire. We've then sat for 2 or 3 hours and we've had a conversation around values and priorities. And my role in that is just holding the space and having a conversation to give them insights. They will have been chatting to me. So what you also learn from this whole experience, which I probably should have said, that when I lost my father, I suffered from grief and I needed to have some help to overcome grief.
Okay.
And as part of that process, I kind of got a far better understanding as to where our feelings come from, where our emotions come from, where our decision making comes from. And that actually was one of the gifts that I got from the loss of my father, was to actually have that insight, so that to be able to hold a space for somebody, to be able to have a conversation that then gives you an insight as to what matters to you and why. Mm-hmm. But you have to come up with all the answers. There's no point me sharing any of mine with you because they're mine, not yours. But once you do that, you then realize that every decision you make has a greater chance of delivering on what matters to you and aligns with your values, which means that your state of ease, peace of mind and joy and everything else automatically increases. Mm-hmm. So if you do that, it automatically increases. Yeah. And that is what we value the most. We don't value the fact that we've got an extra 1 million in our bank or 2 million or 3 million in bank. What we value the most is that our decisions align with what matters to us and why. And actually we're making consistently good decisions with the wealth that we have created. Yeah.
And have you had, I assume that it might throw up things that people don't realise. So for example, I don't know if somebody's selling a business, that then they haven't thought about the white space that follows that of all of a sudden, who am I? What am I doing with that time? Or even, I guess, potentially like people that are retiring, that it feels like, we're going to have so much time to go on holiday. But then for some people, I feel like when you think that through, you might think, well, just going on holiday all the time actually doesn't
Oh, totally.
Serve me.
It can be, during our lives, we have multiple transitions that we go through. So when we go to our first school, when we go to senior school, when we go to university, when we move out of house and everything else. So selling your business or retiring is one of those transitions.
Yeah.
And it is a far trickier transition, selling your business, than you maybe anticipate if you haven't done it before, or if you haven't guided people to do it hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times. And so I always kind of, our aim there is how do you transition with grace? So to transition with grace is to imagine you have sold your business and to think, well, how would I fill my days, my weeks, my years? And whatever it is I am doing, does that align with my values and my priorities?
Yeah.
And if you do that, then the chances of transitioning are far smoother. Because when you sell your business, sometimes you find that all of a sudden on a Monday morning, nobody's ringing you to ask your opinion on anything. You kind of have lost your purpose a little bit. You've maybe lost, whilst you've got the euphoria of being paid an amount of money, so you feel that should give you the joy and the happiness, which if you've worked out the other bits and pieces, it will. Categorically, it changes your life. But you need to actually focus on why you're going to do whatever activity you're going to do. How are you going to fill your time? And is that time authentic and inspirational to you? And if you're a business owner, you should be thinking about that 1, 2, 3 years before you sell your business. And you also then should be creating the plan as to, well, what does it look like once I sell my business?
Yeah.
One of the most challenging things for us all as business owners, if you think 22 years in business, it's kind of like, well, I don't remember not being in business.
Totally.
It's kind of like, well, so it's scary to think, oh my goodness, if I wasn't in my business, what am I going to do? Because I'm so used to being in business.
Yeah.
And then also there are so many questions I need to ask as to, well, if I sell my business, have I got enough money to live another 30 years or, 60? So if I'm going to live another 25, 30 years, have I got enough money? Can I travel? Can I do this? Can I do the other? So one of the exercises, so the first two exercises, obviously priorities and values, are really important, but they're more to do with kind of, that's the wellbeing piece that we talk about.
And just is that also fundamental in your team being able to then build the plan properly? Because I guess it's understanding who they are and the essence of them, but then that leads into
it leads into a plan. So give a really simple example of this, but it applies to any of us in business. But a number of years ago, I was asked by a farming family from the Lake District, would I go and sit with them to have a conversation with them because they were thinking of selling the farm. But, no different, but this just kind of a really nice, simple analogy. So I went and sat with the family, and we had 2 or 3 meetings about, okay, great, you're selling the farm that you've been in for 30 or 40 years, everything's going and everything else. Where are you going to live? Where are you going to live? What are you going to do now you're not milking cows 3 times a week? What cars are you going to drive? What holidays are you going to go on? What about, talk to me about the children. What are the dreams for them? Are they going to get married? Are you going to help them buy houses? Are they going to live on a farm? What are they, so the conversation goes wherever they want the conversation to go. The key thing that you also have to be very careful of is it's not to judge, and they're inspirational is they're inspirational. So it might not be inspirational to you or I, but it's unique to them. So if you can create that environment so that they will share absolutely everything with you as to what they are thinking of doing once the farm has gone, you can challenge them on it to make sure that actually what they're saying they're going to do, I'm going to play golf every single day. Well, actually that becomes quite unrealistic, you tend to find. So you kind of challenge them on it all and everything else. We're able to take all of that information and reverse engineer it all. We're able to put it into our kind of modeling process, and we're able to come up with a basic figure that needs to be achieved for the sale of the farm. And then we're able to present that back to the family. We're able to look at every single what if scenario. We're able to look at every single assumption we have made, and we can change anything they want us to do. So it gives them the peace of mind that it is the right thing to sell the farm when they want to sell the farm. And in that particular case, the farm went to auction. They went to the auction room. It ended up going for about £400,000 more than the figure that we had calculated for them. So when they left that auction room, there was no anxiety. There was no kind of seller's remorse or everything else. They left that room. They already knew what their plan was. They had a plan mapped out. They knew what the cash flow was for the next 10, 15, 20 years.
Yeah.
So when they left, they came out, they had a great smile on their face. They were celebrating. They were having a good night's sleep. They were, on the Monday morning, they knew what they were doing on the Monday morning, and therefore they transitioned well, and they were excited for the next chapter.
Yes.
And that's all about planning before the event, having that conversation. Ideally, if you're a business owner there, having that conversation 12, 18 months beforehand, and then having the guide who is there challenging you, who is purely there to help you make the right decisions for you and your family.
Mm-hmm. And even because we've talked about big life events of retiring, of selling your business, and even like pre that, I think in my experience, a lot of people don't give that much thought until it becomes, it's like nearly round the corner.
Yeah.
Do you have a lot of clients, and would you add, is there a kind of an age, or is it just as soon as possible where you would actually start to look at life plans? And is it just something you think that realistically, in an ideal world, everybody should be doing all of the time?
I think that until you don't want to get bogged down in all the detail, all the planning. You don't want to make life too heavy. We're here for a short period of time. We want to have an amazing experience of life, yes. So if I look back at my own experience, in the early years, I wouldn't have wanted to entertain this conversation because I was too busy having fun. But I think that once you start having an element of complexity in your life, and complexity can be just having children, getting married, having children, running a business, looking after your other family. So for me, it's, running a business, having 4 children, having a wife, having an older parent, having brothers and everything else. So therefore, there are layers of complexity in that.
Yeah.
When you get to that stage in your life, having a plan and having somebody who is going to help you, make you accountable to that plan is invaluable. Absolutely. And again, a lot of your audience as business owners, they will have that. They will already have that level of complexity.
Yes.
And sometimes when you're a business owner, I know from my own experience, you're sometimes paralyzed by decision making.
Yeah.
You're so busy in your work. You're so busy trying to be a good husband, a good father, a good friend. You're trying to run your business that actually the thought of that conversation just kind of, oh my goodness, and you're totally paralyzed because you're going at the pace that you need to go at for your business.
Yeah.
So it's then kind of saying, okay, great. Well, the only way you unlock that mindset is to step away for a period of time, to allow an element of quiet to come into your state, to be able to sit with somebody. And ideally, I always kind of say, to have these types of conversations, which are, they can get quite heavy. People can get quite emotional when they're having these conversations. Is, in my experience, I wouldn't do it with a friend, or I wouldn't do it with my family, because they are likely to judge. They also care, so they're likely to jump in to want to care. And actually what you want is somebody that's just going to hold that space and is going to, with love and care, challenge you on what your vision is and why.
Yeah.
And therefore, if you're a business owner and you're kind of in that situation, once you start to get real clarity, the moment you get clarity as to what you want your experience to look like, then you kind of overlap that with the assets that you have, you very quickly work out which assets are right to have, which assets are not, what decisions you should or shouldn't consider making. And then if you have somebody that is there with you kind of saying, okay, right, well, what's the plan? What are the consequences of the plan? Do you want me to implement the plan? This is what you've said, so I'm going to keep you accountable now. So I'm going to check in with you to make sure you're accountable. There was a research done by Vanguard. So Vanguard is a huge financial organization. Their research suggests that if you have the right type of financial planner that you work with, that person can add an additional 3% to your wealth every year. And the main reason is about coaching the client. It's about behaviors. It's about mentoring and coaching and making you accountable. Mm-hmm. And so actually in that situation, by having somebody in, if you have an element of wealth, by bringing that person in, they will help you feel better, because if they understand your priorities and values, or help you to understand your priorities and values, they then also, that then means that you're more settled, you get more clarity, you start making better decisions. They then make you accountable on your financial decision making, which that alone should be able to add 3% a year on the amount that you have. Mm-hmm. So when you start adding in all these different layers as to the value of a brilliant planner, it's a really important guide to have in your life.
Yeah. And tell me if I'm wrong. I imagine there's a lot of people in those situations that are selling a business, or have come into money or selling a business, and there are a lot of natural things that come to mind, like they're going to buy the fast car or the property in Portugal, and have you seen decisions change because of going through this process? I know you work with sports players as well, so they are actually at the other end of the spectrum, very young with a lot of money. Yeah. But I feel like a lot of business owners, even myself, you'll have that kind of vision of, oh, well, if I sell my business, I would immediately get this and that would be fun. But those things not necessarily just don't bring you happiness, but I guess the novelty wears off. Even the novelty of selling your business, I'm sure, wears off. Do you see that decisions start to be made differently?
Totally. Yeah. So I had an email before I came here, and this was where business owners came, so some pretty successful business owners came to see us a number of months ago, and they were in a state of, we want out at all cost. The stress is too much. We want out of the business. Okay. They then went through this whole process, this kind of initial consultation piece with us. And actually that whole consultation piece completely settled and changed their state. They saw then they were able to see how things should look going forwards. So they actually decided not to sell.
Oh, really?
And not to sell is currently the right thing for them to do. So it's not always, the answer isn't always sell the business.
Interesting.
The answer is change your perspective and change your relationship with that business.
Wow.
And sometimes having a different perspective and changing the conversation can have that effect. But then also, if we look at the other extreme, somebody sells their business. If you love your cars, and you've always loved your cars, and you've always been a petrol head and everything else, some people buy a car and they love it and they keep it for a long period of time. In a lot of cases, people buy it and get rid of it in 6 months' time. The conversation yesterday with a family who was successful, they sold their business. It was a 8-figure sum, so it was a reasonable sum that they received. And at the time of selling, they perceived that they still wanted to be entrepreneurial.
Okay.
So his solutions he went to look for once he sold his business.
So he didn't have existing ideas. He wanted, was this from a perspective of, I still want to have something to do and I'll find something new to do?
Yeah, no, it was more to do with this comes a great question that. So it was more to do with, I would class that under values.
Okay.
So one of his values he had when he sold his business was entrepreneurial. So he had this money. He was then looking as to where I'm going to invest my money to give me my income.
Right.
And his mindset was still in entrepreneurial mindset.
Right.
So he then, with the guidance of an advisor, went and found an entrepreneurial solution. 3 years down the line, the conversation we had with him yesterday was, why did I choose entrepreneurial? I've been an entrepreneur for 20 or 30 years in my business. I've sold it. Actually, what I really want is simplicity. You know, I look at, when I was in my 20s and 30s and 40s, make it as complex as you like, make it as entrepreneurial as you like. Business owners, we can spin multiple plates and we're invincible and we can carry on forever.
Yeah.
Okay. But then when you get into your 50s, or as I am approaching kind of getting into your 60s, you really value simplicity. You value having time. And so the conversation we had with him yesterday, which was just, I was smiling as we were having it, is that he said, why did I not realize that I shouldn't be going into complex and I should be going for simple? And I didn't need to chase the money because actually I'd already sold my business and I had enough money for the rest of my life and to do everything I wanted.
Yeah.
So why have I added more pressure when I don't need it?
And was that just habit, or you just hadn't been shown
I think
an alternative way?
Well, I think it was, there's an element of, he'd been in that entrepreneurial space, or they'd been in that entrepreneurial space for 20 or 30 years. It just felt like, well, of course, you just move from one entrepreneurial environment to another. But actually, if you're selling your business and you're moving into a new chapter of life, being aware of what really matters to you and why, and being really clear on your values and why, ultimately makes the decision align with your well-being.
Yeah.
So in that situation, what we've been asked to do now is, I've got complexed. I'm making lots of money, but I don't want complexed because the money is not as important as how I feel. And actually, I want to enjoy my next 20 or 30 years. I know there's enough money because you've worked out all of the plan for me and worked out every assumption. So actually, what I want is I want you to keep things extremely simple and straightforward so that I am not wasting any of my time and energy focusing on an area that I don't really want to focus on.
Yeah. And am I right in saying that you spent many, many years in financial advice, but you also have, you're also a life coach, a high performance coach. Is there a specific name for that?
Again, this is all life experiences. So by losing Dad and actually having to get somebody to help me with my experience of grief, and in some ways, grief's quite a complex feeling to have, but also it's a reflection of how much you loved somebody. So it is difficult to have grief if you haven't had the other of love.
Yeah.
So I'm extremely grateful to have had that experience. And then I was so curious from the help that I was given that I stayed on with a group of psychologists and psychiatrists to understand about state of mind and resilience. And I've done that for 15 years now. So it means that I'm really curious to understand why we make decisions and how we feel and how we can actually, help others to make good decisions and how we can change perspectives. Mm-hmm. So the way that we work at Zentum is that if a client is able to come to us and they can articulate what inspirational and authentic means, if they are able to go through the exercises and work out what their priorities are and their values are and everything else, well, that's great. It's kind of like, your past go straight now to creating the vision, the plan, and let's create that and give you the peace of mind. And if you want us to implement it, we'll implement it and we'll do all of that for you. If, however, you're struggling to work out what inspirational is, or authentic, or priorities, or even if you're just struggling in your decision making in business, then because I've been in business for 20 or 30 years, because I've had these life experiences and worked through and found the solutions, then people will come and sit with me and we'll just spend some time together to see if I can help them get clarity. And then the moment they have clarity, it's kind of great. We now know which direction we're going in. That's amazing. It's exciting. You see their body language change. You see the colour in their cheeks change. You see everything about them change there. And then you go, great. We now know we're on the right path.
Yeah.
Let's get all of your finances now to align with the vision that you are excited about.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you about business ownership, because you are a multiple business owner, and it's not just about financial services. I know you've got lots of a wedding a wedding venue business. I know there's lots of different things going on, so it's not just about financial services. So you do have the full perspective of being a business owner, as practically everybody listening to this podcast will be. I wanted to just ask you about the team in Zentum, because like you touched on at the beginning of the episode that generally in financial services people will recruit a really good salesperson. That's like the key, like at the very beginning when somebody said you should go into financial services. So for me, everything that you're doing with your clients, from properly understanding who they are, what their values are, it's a very different approach. And how has that been in Zentum in terms of recruiting a team and bringing the right people in? Because it must be, I would feel like for a lot of financial advice practices, recruiting for an advisor is everyone's got the same kind of things they're looking for. It feels like it might be quite different in your practice.
Yeah, totally. I think I didn't really pay enough attention to culture. I knew when I felt good culture in a business, but I hadn't really got into understanding it. And that all changed when we brought in Managing Director, James Spencer. James is an amazing guy. His moral compass is unwavering, and also his understanding of culture is fantastic. And so everybody in our business are recruited on their values. They're about their values and behaviours. And again, I don't want to, to be disingenuous anyway, but you can work out people's values by the way they behave. So how you treat other people, how you conduct yourself and everything else, you can tell me what your values are, but your behaviours and your actions will tell me what your true values are.
Yes.
And so we recruit always on values, and the types of people that we're going for is that we don't want, nor do we need salespeople. In some ways, that is where I came from originally, and ultimately as the entrepreneur, the business owner, I probably am more salesy. But the types of people that I'm looking to recruit are people who ultimately want to be amazing guides. So kind of the likes of, your doctors, your surgeons, your nurses, your vets, people like that, whose mentality is, I have a desire to help others. I have a desire to care. I have a desire to make a difference, not I have a desire to make a lot of money.
Yes, yeah.
And so that is how we recruit now. And the lady who's just joined us, she has no previous experience or knowledge of the subject matter.
Really?
But we can, because we don't need that. The subject matter is not overly complicated.
Okay.
And if you have a team of people, well, then the academic solutions are not that difficult.
Yeah.
The most important thing you have to have is you've got to have the right values and be part of a team with a desire to make a difference to people's lives. And the academic solutions can be taught, whereas I think trying to teach people the right values is a far more challenging thing to do. And just on that point, something that I read just before coming into here is I read on the financial, just something on the financial planning website or what have you, that an IFA business had just shut down, and the reason they gave it was the principals just got divorced, so he's closed his practice down.
Right.
And it made me just reflect on with Zentum. If I go back, say 6 or 7 years ago, I could have just remained as a one practitioner practice, and it would have been far simpler and everything else. However, I felt that I had a duty of care to my clients, that if anything ever happened to me, I needed to make sure that there was continuity and robustness of the business. Because if you're going to engage in this type of relationship, there is a lot of time and effort needed by both parties to really understand what matters to a family and why.
Yeah.
And we have to also invest in that time and everything else. So what I wanted to make sure by building a team up is building a team that said, okay, great. Well, if anybody was poorly, if anybody was off, if anything happens, the clients always still had that service and they had that consistency, because that is what makes the difference to their lives.
Wow. Can I just dig into that a tiny bit more with the recruitment piece of it? I just think it's really interesting. I mean, I sit in like a lot of networking groups and masterminds, and team, when it comes to a business owner, when you get it right, it is the most amazing thing, isn't it? And then but I feel like a lot of business owners love to say it's really hard to get good people. Yeah. Do you know? And obviously a lot of it can be a self-fulfilling prophecy, but there's a lot of with business owners that no one do it as good as me, or it's hard to get good people, or they've done this. So, and there's a lot of people that talk about recruiting on will, not skill. And I know different business owners have had different experiences with that the person was really, a nice person, had all the energy and attitude, but wasn't able to fulfill the role. So I'm just like super intrigued that when you go to advertise for that role, say with the lady that's just joined you, how do you make it? Because I also think like how that the lady that's joined you, how she came across the role, how would she know that actually it was possible not to have all of the skill? How do you make it? Have you titled your people in your business with something completely different so that you're not just kind of in the catchment area of people looking in financial advice? Or how have you done that so you grab people from other sectors that are the kind of people you want? I feel like that will be really helpful for a lot of business owners who are like, well, actually, if I could just get somebody that's really passionate, cares, of service, and I can train them, but how do I find them?
Yeah, great. And again, this is down to James and to Rachel, who are my co-directors, is that anybody who comes into our business is normally being introduced through our team.
Oh, wow.
So our team are always looking for people.
Oh, that's brilliant.
So if they're ever at a networking event, if they're ever out, even if they're just having drinks with friends or everything else. So the lady who's just joined us, there was no advert. There was nothing put in. It was somebody in our team turned around and said to her, why don't you go and have a conversation with Zentum and have a conversation with James, Rachel, and what have you? And so they have that conversation. They then met all the team. And interestingly enough, she came to our Christmas party before she joined us. And part of the recruitment process was come to our Christmas party, come and interact with all of us. Let's have some time together. Let's all drop our guards. Let's be honest. And then at the end of it all, let's all make a decision whether you think that you are somebody that would be a fantastic member of our team. So a completely different way.
Oh, wow,
there was no interviewing. There was no formal interview process. There was no kind of tests or anything else. It was a case of, do you have the life skills and do you have the values that matter to us to be of service to our clients? And everything else, we will all rally around and we will support you and we will help you get whatever it is you need, but you need to show us what you're about. That's
brilliant. Because I guess also, I'm just thinking, relaying this back to my own business, like internally we have a referral scheme if somebody introduces somebody into the business, which now I think about it, like it's been mentioned once in a blue moon. But I guess the key part for me there is that your team are all so clear on what your values are that it's easy for them to have the antennae to spot someone. Do you know, I know when you came to our office in December, we were talking about the values on my PA's wall. And we were talking about how you're also very much like the whole business is intertwined with its values. And I think it's really easy for somebody to stick something on the wall, isn't it? And it becomes just a thing that was done at the very beginning and it looks good when guests come in. So I guess my question is, because we did talk about this in December, just clearly your values are like the core part of Zentum. And how is it that they keep flowing through and that the team are so clear on what the Zentum values are?
I think it comes from, it has to come from the leadership team.
Yeah.
So I think that the leadership team have to demonstrate day in, day out those values so that, they have to genuinely care about the team. So, if you are seen to be caring about the team, and again, James and Rachel are just amazing at looking after the team. And so it's all well and good having something up on a blackboard, but actually your actions are what matter. So caring for people when people have challenges in their life, making sure that you give them the space, you support them, you encourage them. So you live by what you say you're going to live by, which also feels better, even though it might not always be, there might be a consequence of it in the short term.
Yeah.
The actual loyalty that you gain, the camaraderie that you get at the Christmas party. It was my 22nd Christmas party that I've been on for Zentum. And just seeing the amount of laughter, the amount of banter, the amount of genuine care for each other, the genuine support and encouragement for each other, I just sit there going, wow, isn't that just fantastic to see that everybody is being themselves, but they genuinely care. And then those same values and everything else transcend into how we care for our clients. It's not fake. We care for our clients.
Yeah.
We will do whatever we need to do for our clients because that is what I would hope somebody would do for my father or would do for Wendy or would do for my mother or what have you. And if you do that, then that gives you huge purpose. It motivates you to get up and do what you're going to do because you totally believe in what it's about. But then, for us, it's again making sure that people don't, for business owners, you don't spend too long in that environment and miss out on the next chapter. So it's kind of knowing, well, actually that's amazing, but there are still other things I want to do in my life. And whether, do I sell my business? What do I do with my business? And that is where sitting with somebody like us who can actually help you articulate that and then help you work out all of those questions you have in your head. How do we answer as many of those as possible so you actually settle, so you make a good decision? Yes, I should sell my business. What do I need to sell it for? And when you're doing all of that, you then feel as relaxed and as comfortable as you possibly can in the process. And also, as you and I will both know, as business owners, sometimes the levels of anxiety are immense. We're not immune. I mean, I'm sat here now thinking, because somebody might perceive that I have all the answers. I don't have all the answers, but I know where to go to get them. I know how to get clarity on situations. But my levels of anxiety as a business owner are right up there with anybody else's, and sometimes my perspective is not aligned. I have an amazing coach that I go and see to go and see a coach and say, look, I'm running multiple businesses. I'm doing all of these bits and pieces. Where should my energy be focused? What are there any insights? Are there any perspective? What can you give me? And so I go and I see that this gentleman, every 6 to 8 weeks, and it's amazing. Well, fundamentally, that same type of relationship is available with an amazing financial. If you go to, and it's not about us either. You can go to anybody out there, but ultimately, you're looking to go to an organisation who helps you, coaches you, mentors you, helps you get clarity and helps you make amazing decisions. And if you can get an organisation that does all of that and they consistently deliver a service and you have absolute clarity as to what you're paying them for and why, it's an amazing relationship to have, and it's rewarding both ways. It's rewarding for our clients, and they say thank you, and we get Christmas cards and what have you, and it's also rewarding for us, knowing that we're having a positive impact on their lives.
I love that. I feel like I've never heard the role of a financial advisor be talked about in such a beautiful way as that.
And I think, again, part of the just on the charging structure piece, just to try and, is that if we're looking to help a family, or again, this is how I would want somebody to approach me now if they were coming to have a conversation with me, would be, everybody I meet, if it's their own finances, their finances are not complex. They're not complex because they're at their finances, they know them. But they might be complex to a third party when they look at it. So for me, it's a case of, okay, well, let's do an initial piece of consultation work. Let's work out your values, your priorities. Let's work out what your plan is. Let's work out how complex it is. Let's work out what work is needed. And it really has no relevance as to the amount of wealth you've got, because it's just a case of we're going to do some due diligence on those dreams, aspirations, and the complexity of your needs. And that really is a fixed fee. So it's a fixed amount, because the amount of work we have to do doesn't change because of the amount of money in somebody's bank account. And that really should be the starting point, because then that's the point. And then if the client wants to, the client can go and do it all themselves. If they've got the time, inclination, desire, just go onto the internet, go and chat to AI and see if you can get all your answers. And if you want to fill out all the forms, and if you want to do it all, and if you want to manage it all yourself, you can do. But what we tend to find is that just creates even more anxiety, because they're taking on more and more and more pressure. So actually what they want to do is to say, great, well, we now have clarity as to what we need to do and why. Can you implement it all for us?
Yeah.
Can you implement it all for us? And again, that isn't based on the value of the fund. It's valued on the time it's going to take us to implement everything, the complexity of their needs. And there is a little bit of increase in value because of the sum, because ultimately, if we're going to add an extra 3% per annum, the bigger the sum, the more value we add. But the client gets to know that before they enter into the relationship. So they know on day one what they're paying and why. And then every year it's like a subscription model. It's just saying, great, well, life is fluid, things change, tax changes, economic situation changes, personal circumstances changes. So you need that guide by your side all the time, just so that whenever you're looking to make a decision, you can just say, do you know what, I'm just going to check in with the team. I'm just going to check in that I'm making a great decision. That's fine. Or have you thought of that? We make a good decision and we just carry on doing that. And we have clients that have been with us for 25, 30 years. And some of our clients would turn around and say, you know more about me and my family than anybody else in the world, because you have spent the time to listen and you've spent the time to really understand what matters to us and why.
Yeah, and that's exactly how it should be, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
With a relationship with a financial advisor. And we are coming to the end of our time together, which I can't believe it's flown by. We had a chat in December where you'd actually given like an example where you'd, because of your fixed fee pricing, you'd saved a client almost the whole of their, well, it was the whole of their holiday budget for a year.
Good for you to mention that. So we created Zentum Adventures a year or so ago, which fundamentally was like a concierge service for travel and experiences and everything else. And in one of the cases that we had is that by the client who had gone to an organisation that was completely rewarded by as a percentage of her portfolio, she came across to us. Her situation wasn't overly complicated. So actually the savings by coming to us rather than being with a company that was taking a percentage was sufficient that it actually paid for her to go on a 2-week holiday every single year. And basically that was courtesy of the savings that we'd added. So she was able to go to Zentum Adventures. She was able to talk to them through about an amazing holiday. She paid for all of that holiday, and actually the cost to her was neutral because we'd saved her the cost of a beautiful holiday every single year. And it was a kind of like, well, do you want to go on that holiday, or do you want your advisor who is taking a percentage? But again, this only really applies for clients who want, most of our clients have material wealth in excess of £1 million. So most of the people we're working with have between 1 and 20 million of personal wealth. So it doesn't work for 20,000
at every level.
But the moment you start exceeding 1 million or 2 or 3, well then, do you want those beautiful holidays, or would you like somebody else to have them?
Which is a great question to ask. Dominic, you've been absolutely amazing. I feel like you've really, I feel like you've really set out what an advisor with what a relationship with a financial advisor should actually be with. And even if you've got smaller pots of money or larger pots, it should be that kind of guide and someone. I would have thought a close relationship of somebody that you know well. I think like you've articulated it so well. Yeah. Dominic, if somebody would like to contact you, get in touch with you, where is the best place to find out more about Dominic or more about Zentum?
Yeah, so they can reach out to me on LinkedIn. So if they're on LinkedIn, just go on to Dominic Baldwin and you'll just reach out and I'll connect. And if you want to book in for a 15-minute conversation, be very happy to do that. No obligation, confidential, have a conversation. Or they can just go to our website, which is Zentum, Xentum. And on there is a book a call. And again, that call does come through to me initially because I normally chat to most people who are thinking of coming to Zentum before it goes to one of the team. So yeah, just Amazing. Social media, reach out. And if we can help, or if anybody wants any guides that we have or anything else, just reach out. And if we can help, we'd love to.
It's really fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing so much today on the episode, Dominic.
Yeah, well, thanks for the invitation. Thanks, Emma.